Confronted my husband about his late nights at the office, only to discover his overtime was a second family. I'm a 35-year-old woman living and working abroad, but my Midwestern roots always tug at my heart. Growing up, it was just me, my older brother Jason, 43 male, and our parents, now in their 70s. We didn't have much, always working class, but we had enough. Jason always was a bit of a dweeb, frankly, and in high school he married Tiffany, 40F. Tiffany was wild, always drinking, partying, into who knows what else, but she was good looking, and that seemed to be more than enough for Jason. They had 3 kids, Jace, 19, Jeff, 17, and Hannah, 12F. Their marriage dissolved before Hannah was even born, too much chaos, and though they tried to patch things up, they ended up divorced. Jason started dating Jenny, 43F, while still juggling custody with Tiffany. Tiffany, having been a stay-at-home mom, secured child support and alimony. My brother was always working, always tired. At first, I liked Jenny. She wasn't as flashy as Tiffany, but she was genuinely nice, educated, had a good job. I thought my brother had finally made a better choice. But Jenny struggled when the kids didn't instantly warm up to her, didn't call her mom. The divorce had hit them hard. She got pregnant pretty quickly, had Daisy, 10F, and married Jason. Around that same time, Jace, Jeff, and Hannah all began refusing to stay at Tiffany's. She was spiraling, drinking, bringing random men home, and eventually all 3 kids moved in with Jason and Jenny full-time. Tiffany fled the picture completely. I tried to empathize with Jenny. Suddenly becoming a full-time stepmom to 3 older kids while caring for a newborn must have been overwhelming. But Jenny's transformation was shocking. She quit her job and insisted she was only a som for her own child. Meanwhile, Jason was killing himself at work, 70+ hours a week, and her parents were helping them financially, but Jenny took over the household finances. She orchestrated it so that only Jason, Jenny, and Daisy did family stuff together, dinners, events, vacations, leaving the older 3 at home. It disgusted me, and I didn't hesitate to tell Jason what I thought. But he just shrugged and told me his divorce broke him and he'd do anything to keep Jenny happy to avoid another failed marriage. It was, and still is, pathetic. A decade ago, I was younger, more naive, and frankly just scraping by myself, so my attitude was basically, my brother's a terrible dad, but I'm on another continent and all I can do is support the kids when I can. In retrospect, I wish I'd done more. But I did what I could. When Jason and Jenny refused to pay for driving lessons for Jace, even though Jenny flat out refused to drive the kids anywhere, my mom stepped in and taught him. I bought him a used car. We had to bully Jason into putting him on the family insurance, which Jace still pays for. Same deal for Jeff, they share the car for their activities and Hannah's. My wife and I aren't interested in having kids, so we made Jace, Jeff, and Hannah our sole beneficiaries in our will after learning that Jason and Jenny only planned to give them the bare minimum. Everything goes to Daisy. My wife and I started taking the older kids on trips when we visited the States, nothing extravagant, just good, memorable times in places like Florida, Utah, or California. The kids are outdoorsy, and every year has been a hit for them. We always scheduled it to coincide with Jason, Jenny, and Daisy's trips, so it didn't seem unfair. But this year, Jace has a summer internship, so we moved the trip to fall, Maine this time, leaves. I gave Jason the heads up about the dates, they line up with the school schedules, no issues, but he hit me with a request, start including Daisy too. Jenny's parents couldn't help them out anymore due to some bad investments, so Jason and Jenny can't afford a vacation this year. Jenny is job hunting, but no luck so far. Even if things had been fair until now, I wouldn't want to take Daisy. She's a massive brat, spoiled, mean, always lording over her siblings how much more she gets. She's point blank told me the older kids aren't her siblings, they're Tiffany's kids. She's had screaming tantrums on holidays if her gifts aren't bigger, told my wife and me we're going to hell, that only stopped after Jenny was made aware and actually disciplined Daisy once, a rare occurrence. She's a total slob, and Jenny enables it. I do feel bad thinking this way about a kid. Maybe she'll grow out of it. But there is no way I want her on our trip. I told Jason we can't handle 4 kids, so it'll just be the 5 of us. He countered with ideas. Jenny could come to help, absolutely not, or our mom, who has a hip replacement scheduled and definitely isn't up for adventures. Even logistics make it unworkable, we'd need 2 cars. And let's be honest, I just don't want 2. Now, Jason and Jenny are shaming us online, trying to play the victim card, which seems to work on their friends and her family. But even my dad, who's usually one for keeping the peace, told me to stand firm. Then my wife, and this is why I love her, called me out. Are we really so different from Jenny if we're picking and choosing kids based on which parent we like or don't like? At first, we were balancing the scales, but with Daisy left out, now we're tipping them again. She told me it's my family, my choice, but to really consider the long term. She made me question, are we, by excluding Daisy, just perpetuating the same dynamic we hate Jenny for? My gut tells me to stick with the older 3, but Daisy is only 10, none of this is her fault. Is it evil of me, as an aunt, to leave her out? Update 1. Daisy is not constantly some Veruca Salt-esque monster child. Sure, She has her bratty moments, what 10-year-old doesn't? But she's also genuinely funny and caring. She's the only grandchild who's stuck with the church choir that my mom runs, even though I'm sure she doesn't really love it. She always remembers to call my wife and me on our birthdays. When their family dog got too old to climb the stairs, Daisy dragged her own mattress downstairs and slept beside her every night until the dog passed, just so she wouldn't be lonely. People aren't cartoon villains. I wish folks would stop attacking a 10-year-old for being imperfect. I'm not someone who deals in online messiness or drama, and I don't go back and forth with people outside of my story. I just want to share what's been going on from my lane, which, by the way, is literally half a world away from theirs. I live at least a 15-hour plane ride distant, in a remote, mostly rural region, not some bustling international city with an expat community or international schools. It's the nature of my job, a job I fought hard to have, even if it doesn't make hosting children or young adults practical. I'm doing fine, but I don't have unlimited resources to be whisking Daisy away on trial trips, or buying a 4-bedroom house just for the oldest kids to move into together. That's never been in the cards. Meanwhile, I've done my best to avoid Jenny and Jason's vague online campaigns. They thrive on stirring things up, but I've been tuning them out. Honestly, I wasn't even planning on giving an update until I got more background information. But then, last weekend, my brother called unexpectedly. Only, it wasn't him on the line, it was Daisy, sobbing. Through tears, she begged me, she promised she'd be good, that she was sorry for being bad, that she wanted desperately to come on the trip. She vowed to be quiet, to not say anything rude, and swore she'd find a way to show everyone, me, my wife, her parents, that she's good and not a bad person. The call was gut-wrenching. She sounded like she was in the dark, convinced that if she could only prove herself, everything would be all right. I tried to calm her down. I told her, as sincerely as I could, that both her aunts love her and no one thinks she's a bad person. Then my brother snatched the phone and, with a flat, "See what you've done," hung up on me. I called back immediately, but got no answer. I started texting our mom, as well as Jace and Jeff, to figure out what was going on. Of course, by the time I woke up the next morning, there was yet another melodramatic post circulating about how cruel people can be to innocent children. Between my mom and Jeff, I finally got the rest of the story. I have no idea where all their money goes, maybe some disastrous financial choices or simply bad luck, but my brother and Jenny are out of funds. To the point that they're asking my parents, who are on a fixed, low income, to front money for Daisy's tuition. Naturally, my parents can't afford that. So, my brother and Jenny told Daisy she had to pick between attending her expensive school or going on vacation. She chose her school. But Jenny's job search has dragged on longer than anyone hoped and now they can't cover school either. I know some people seem to think Daisy's a little demon, but hearing all this just broke my heart. It kills me even more knowing the older three always went to public school. I'm pretty sure Jenny's parents had been the ones footing Daisy's tuition all along. According to Jeff, Daisy is getting older, forming her own opinions, and Jenny resents that shift. When Daisy found out she couldn't go back to her private school and asked about the trip, Jenny told her she couldn't come because she was bad. The cruelty of that just leaves me speechless. I don't think this is the end of it. Jeff can be a bit indiscreet, but he told me Jenny's acting unhinged. He jokingly blamed Botox and Ozempic withdrawal. He did say the house wasn't as chaotic as I might think. Jenny mostly ignores everyone these days. Jeff's working, Hannah's spending most of her summer at her best friend's. Let me be clear on one more thing. I know a lot of people are worried about my nephews and nieces, imagining they live in miserable conditions, with this vacation as their only respite. Yes, I know their situation is unfair and I feel deeply for them, but they're happy kids. Jace has told me that since Daisy came along, they've basically treated Jenny like an eccentric roommate that their hopelessly dweeby dad happens to be sleeping with. It's not shouting matches and constant hostility, more like polite indifference. And they truly do care about Daisy, they'd never ask me to leave her behind. The truth is, it's me who doesn't want to bring her, because she really needs a parent with her. And, to quote Drill, I would face God and walk backwards into hell before I ever invited, much less paid for, Jenny to come with us. Update 2. Unfortunately, my brother and Jenny have not changed a bit, and since everything blew up, I've witnessed several more instances where they've clearly played favorites with Daisy over the other 3 kids. As I've mentioned before, I steer clear of social media drama, any drama, really, but especially when it's out there for all to see. I've been ignoring Jenny's cryptic little vague book campaign, even as she rallied a few family and friends to her side. But then, out of the blue, a cousin reached out to me a few days ago, wanting to talk. I barely remember her, honestly. She and Jenny aren't close, but she had shown up at a few pre-baby events. We set up a FaceTime, since I reminded her, and I'll remind you, too, that I live far away, in a totally different time zone, which makes all those little trips with Daisy impossible, no matter what Jenny thinks. She filled me in on something jaw-dropping. Jenny and Jason have been lying to my whole family about their financial situation. Jenny's parents, she's an only child, aren't broke. Far from it, actually. They managed to dodge the social media rabbit hole, unlike my mom who now sends me nonsense every morning, but I love her anyway. It turns out, Jenny's parents cut her off completely months ago. All this time, she's been spinning this lie about them wishing they Could help but being unable to, and my parents believed her, too. My jaw practically hit the floor as my cousin laid out the backstory. A few years ago, Jenny apparently complained to my mom about having a 16-year sentence with Tiffany's kids, grumbling that even when the boys were out at 18, Hannah would still be around for years, just a few years older than Daisy. My mom, ever the firecracker, snapped back that anyone would be lucky to have Hannah, and if Jenny couldn't deal, Hannah could always stay with them. It was just a snarky comment, but Jenny clung to it like it was written in stone. The plan started to take shape last year. When my nephew Jace graduated from high school, Jenny and my brother told him he couldn't stay. Jeff, my other nephew, has already been put on notice, too. Jenny's parents rarely see the older kids, Jenny and my brother never bring them over, and Pam and her husband don't travel much or like coming out to my hometown. So, they had no clue what was going on, thinking, apparently, that the older kids simply preferred to spend the time my brother, Jenny, and Daisy visited with my parents. It was what they'd been told. But Jenny couldn't keep her mouth shut, and when she started hinting about only having a year left before she'd finally have the house to herself, her mom, Pam, finally asked about Hannah. That's when Jenny spun this elaborate lie. She said my parents wanted to raise Hannah to ease the strain on her marriage. Something about that didn't sit well with Pam, so she called my mom after Jenny left. They aren't especially close but do talk occasionally. My mom was thoroughly confused and explained that, while their house is tiny and not ideal, of course the kids could stay if it was ever needed. During the call, my mom let it slip that Jace had actually been staying with them when he returned from college, and Pam was baffled. Why wasn't he staying with Jason and Jenny? When she found out Jace had been kicked out, she was floored. Apparently, after that call, Pam picked up the phone and unloaded on Jenny, asking how she could still demand money from her elderly parents while shoving an 18-year-old out the door to figure it out. That phone call ended with Jenny and my brother being cut off financially, instantly and for good. According to my cousin, Pam and her husband had been footing the bill to the tune of tens of thousands of dollars a year. What's more, unbelievably, they truly had no clue how bad the favoritism had become. At first, I couldn't bring myself to believe it. How could her parents not see it? But Jenny had spun such a web of lies, making my parents and me out to be the ones spoiling the older three while Daisy was ignored. Even before I started taking the big kids on trips, she'd invent vacations I supposedly funded as an excuse for them not joining in on Daisy's outings. She even told them I was the reason the older kids could go to Daisy's private school. When Pam finally looked into it and realized Jace hadn't even graduated from that school, she immediately pulled the financial plug, including on tuition, which she was planning to cover. Now, Pam won't even take Jenny's calls. She's refusing to listen to relatives defending Jenny, and those relatives, mainly a few aunts and cousins, are firmly on Jenny's side because they already have money beef with Pam. After learning all this, I asked my cousin if Pam really knew the full truth. So, I told her some details that shocked her, and she asked if Pam could reach out to me directly. I agreed, and the next day the phone rang. Honestly, I didn't know what to expect. Pam's a quiet person, and we'd only spoken a handful of times before. She just sounded so tired. She admitted that Jenny was always a challenge, saying, "This is what comes of my own failures as a parent." I told her Jenny isn't a child anymore, she's over 40, after all, and got a tired laugh and an apology for everything I'd shouldered for my older nibblings. I told her honestly, I want to help them, and I'd do it again, but I appreciated her saying so. She assured me she'd set the record straight with the rest of her family. Unfortunately for them, this nuclear family fairy tale Jenny and Jason have been clinging to is over. The money's gone. Jenny's had to get a job after being out of the workforce for a decade, and it is not going well for her. I truly do feel bad for Daisy, who's stuck in the middle. Maybe, finally, things will be forced to get a little more equal in that household. Obviously, this saga isn't over, and my parents and I will stay vigilant, watching out for the kids and keeping open lines of communication. But do I feel bad for Jenny and Jason? Not for a second. Update 3. I thought things might finally settle down after Jenny's parents cut them off, but I was wrong. Dead wrong. What happened next has left me questioning everything I thought I knew about my brother and his marriage. It started when Jeff called me 3 weeks ago, which was unusual since he typically just texts. He sounded shaken, almost whispering into the phone. He told me he'd overheard Jenny on a phone call late at night, crying and saying things like I can't keep doing this and he doesn't even know, does he? Jeff assumed she was talking to a friend about their money problems, but something felt off about the conversation. Then, last week, Hannah called me in tears. She'd been staying at her friend's house most of the summer, but when she came home to grab some clothes, she walked in on something that made her stomach drop. Jenny was in the kitchen with a man Hannah didn't recognize, not Jason, who was at work. They weren't doing anything inappropriate, but Jenny looked panicked when she saw Hannah, quickly ushering the man out the back door. When Hannah asked who he was, Jenny snapped that it was none of her business and told her to go back to her friend's house. I tried to calm Hannah down, telling her it could be anything. Maybe Jenny was interviewing for jobs, maybe it was a contractor giving estimates, but Hannah's always been perceptive, and she said something that stuck with me. "Aunt." Jenny looked scared, not embarrassed. Like she'd been caught doing something really bad. The pieces started falling into place when my mom called 2 days ago. She'd been grocery shopping when she ran into Jenny's old coworker from her previous job, the one Jenny had before she quit to become a stay-at-home mom. The woman seemed surprised to see my mom and asked how Jenny was handling everything that happened. When my mom looked confused, the woman's face went white. She stammered something about assuming the family knew, then quickly excused herself. My mom, being my mom, wasn't about to let that slide. She did some digging through mutual acquaintances and discovered something that made my blood run cold. Jenny didn't quit her job 10 years ago to be a stay-at-home mom like she'd told everyone. She was fired for embezzling money from the company's client accounts. The amounts weren't huge, a few thousand here and there over several months, but it was systematic. Jenny's former employer decided not to press charges in exchange for full restitution and her immediate resignation, but they made sure word got around their industry. That's why Jenny hasn't been able to find work now, despite what she's been telling Jason and everyone else. She's essentially blacklisted, but here's where it gets worse. Remember all that money Jenny's parents were sending? The tens of thousands per year? My cousin did some more digging after our last conversation, and it turns out Jenny had been inflating the amounts she was requesting. If her parents sent $3,000 for Daisy's tuition, Jenny would tell Jason they sent $2,000 and pocket the difference. She'd been skimming money from her own parents for years. When I confronted my brother with what I'd learned, expecting him to be shocked, he went completely silent. Then, in the flattest voice I've ever heard from him, he said, "I know about the job. I've known for years." I was speechless. He continued, "I found the paperwork when Daisy was 2. Jenny begged me not to leave her, said it was just a mistake, that she'd only taken the money because she was scared about providing for our family. She promised it would never happen again, but it did happen again." Jason admitted that over the years, money had gone missing from their joint accounts, small amounts that Jenny would claim were for household expenses or Daisy's activities. He'd started keeping his paychecks in a separate account she couldn't access, which is why they'd been so dependent on her parents' money. The man Hannah saw at the house? Jason thinks it might be someone Jenny owes money to. Apparently, she'd taken out credit cards in both their names without telling him, and they're maxed out. The stress of keeping all these lies straight, combined with losing her parents' financial support, has pushed Jenny to what Jason called a breaking point. I asked him why he stayed, why he enabled this for so long. His answer broke my heart, because I was terrified of being alone again. I thought if I could just keep her happy, if I could just give her what she wanted, she wouldn't leave. I know what that makes me. I know I failed Jace, Jeff, and Hannah. But I couldn't face another divorce. Now Jason's talking about finally leaving Jenny, but he's scared. Not just emotionally, but practically. With their finances in ruins and potential legal issues looming, he doesn't know how he'd manage custody of Daisy or support all 4 kids on his own. He's also worried about what Jenny might do if he tries to leave, whether she might disappear with Daisy the way Tiffany disappeared, or worse. I told him he needs to document everything, maybe talk to a lawyer, definitely get some counseling. I offered to help financially if he's serious about making changes, but only if he puts the kids first this time. All of them, including Daisy. As for our main trip, it's still happening with just the 3 older kids. Daisy's back in public school now, and honestly, she seems happier there. She's made friends, joined the soccer team, and according to Jeff, she started asking uncomfortable questions about why her brothers and sister can't live at home anymore. Maybe this crisis will finally force some honesty in that household. Or maybe it'll just push them deeper into dysfunction. Either way, I'm done making excuses for my brother, and I'm done pretending this situation is sustainable. The kids deserve better. All of them. Update 4. I never thought I'd be writing another update so soon, but the last month has been an absolute whirlwind. What started as my brother finally considering leaving Jenny has spiraled into something much darker and more complicated than any of us saw coming. The main trip happened as planned, and honestly, it was exactly what Jace, Jeff, and Hannah needed. We hiked, saw the fall colors, ate way too much lobster, and for a few days, they got to just be kids without all the chaos at home. But the peace didn't last long. 2 days after we returned, Jason called me in a panic. Jenny was gone. Not just out running errands, actually gone, and she'd taken Daisy with her. No note, no explanation, just empty drawers and missing suitcases. Jason had come home from work to find the house eerily quiet and half of Daisy's things missing from her room. At first, I thought maybe Jenny had just taken Daisy to visit family, but Jason checked, her parents hadn't heard from her, and when he called Pam directly, she sounded genuinely worried. That's when things got really scary. Jason discovered that Jenny had cleaned out what little was left in their joint savings account, about $800, and apparently, she'd been selling things. Daisy's expensive electronics, some of Jason's tools, even some of my mom's antique jewelry that had been borrowed months ago. The police couldn't do much initially since there was no custody order specifically for Daisy, and technically Jenny wasn't violating any laws by taking her own daughter on a trip. But Jeff, who'd been keeping an eye on Jenny's social media accounts, noticed something strange. She'd been posting vague updates about new beginnings and protecting what matters most, but the location tags were inconsistent and seemed deliberately misleading. Then, 3 days into Jenny and Daisy being missing, we got our first real clue. Hannah's friend's mom called my mom, asking if everything was okay with our family. Apparently, Jenny had shown up at their house the week before our main trip, asking detailed questions about Hannah's whereabouts and daily routine. She'd seemed particularly interested in knowing when Hannah would be coming back to Jason's house and had asked if the friend's family was planning any trips where Hannah might join them. That conversation made my skin crawl. Why was Jenny so interested in Hannah's schedule? It felt predatory, and suddenly I started wondering if Jenny's disappearance was less about running away and more about planning something. The breakthrough came when Jeff, bless him, remembered that Jenny had been obsessed with this true crime podcast about parental kidnapping cases. She'd listened to it constantly over the summer, always talking about how mothers will do anything to protect their children from toxic family situations. Jeff had found it weird at the time since Jenny had never shown much interest in true crime before, but now it felt like research. Jason finally got serious about involving lawyers and private investigators. That's when we learned Jenny had been planning this for months. She'd been slowly moving money around, researching states with different custody laws, and even looking into changing both her and Daisy's names. The man Hannah had seen at the house? He wasn't someone Jenny owed money to, he was apparently someone helping her establish new documents. But here's where it gets really twisted. The private investigator Jason hired discovered that Jenny had been in contact with Tiffany. Yes, that Tiffany, the older kid's biological mother who'd vanished from their lives years ago. Somehow, Jenny had tracked her down and they'd been communicating for months. According to their message history, which the investigator was able to access, Jenny had convinced Tiffany that Jason and our family were poisoning the kids against their real mothers and that they needed to save both their daughters. The plan, as far as we can piece together, was for Jenny to disappear with Daisy while Tiffany would somehow grab Hannah. They'd convinced themselves they were rescuing their daughters from a toxic situation. The scariest part? They'd apparently been planning to go to Mexico, where Tiffany had been living under a different name for the past few years. Fortunately, their plan fell apart when Hannah didn't come home when Jenny expected. Since Hannah had been staying at her friend's house most of the summer, Jenny's timeline got messed up, and she panicked and ran with just Daisy instead of waiting for the right moment to coordinate with Tiffany. We found them 6 days later. Jenny had been hiding out in a motel about 4 hours away, apparently waiting for Tiffany to join them with Hannah. But Tiffany never showed. Turns out she'd gotten cold feet and was already having second thoughts about the whole plan. When the police finally tracked Jenny down, Daisy was found crying in the bathroom, asking to call her dad and saying she wanted to go home. The reunion between Jason and Daisy was heartbreaking. She was so confused about why her mom had told her they were going on a special secret trip and why she couldn't call anyone. Jenny had apparently been filling Daisy's head with stories about how Jason and our family didn't really love her, that we all preferred the older kids, and that Jenny was the only one who truly cared about her. Jenny's been charged with several things: child endangerment, fraud, and something related to the fake documents. She's currently out on bail, staying with some distant relative, and isn't allowed to see Daisy unsupervised. Jason finally filed for divorce and emergency custody. The irony is that now he's exactly where he was trying so hard to avoid, facing another failed marriage and being essentially a single parent. But the silver lining in all this chaos? Daisy's been staying with us, my parents, while Jason sorts out childcare. And for the first time, she's living in the same house as her older siblings. Jace came home from college to help, Jeff's been incredible with her, and Hannah has stepped up in ways that make me proud to be her aunt. Daisy's been asking a lot of questions about everything, and Jason's finally being honest with her about the family dynamics. She's started calling Jace, Jeff, and Hannah her brothers and sister instead of Tiffany's kids. Last week, she asked Jason why Jenny always made her eat dinner separately from everyone else, and when he couldn't give her a good answer, I watched something click in her 10-year-old brain. As for Tiffany, she's apparently back to hiding wherever she's been all these years. The police couldn't get enough evidence to charge her with anything since she never actually took Hannah, but they're keeping an eye out in case she surfaces again. Jason's a mess, but he's finally in therapy and actually showing up as a father for all 4 kids. He's had to take a second job to handle the legal fees and childcare costs, but he says it's worth it to finally stop living in fear of the truth. The strangest part of all this? I actually feel sorry for Jenny. Not for what she did, that was unforgivable, but for how completely she lost herself in lies and paranoia. The woman who used to be genuinely nice and educated became someone I barely recognized, someone who was willing to traumatize her own daughter to maintain her fantasy of the perfect nuclear family. Next month, all 4 kids are coming to stay with my wife and me for Thanksgiving. For the first time in over a decade, it'll actually be all of them together, and I'm looking forward to it more than any holiday I can remember. Maybe some families are just meant to be broken before they can be put back together the right way.